This episode is sponsored by the Live Alcohol Experiment, a 30-day science-based and compassion-led journey where you learn to develop a healthier relationship with alcohol without relying on willpower. Why? Because the truth is that willpower runs out. Instead, you learn how to focus on what you gain, not what you give up, so you can feel good about the decisions you make without shame or guilt. With the 30 days of video training, virtual daily coaching, and a private and supportive community, you get that and so much more. Join us today to get happier, healthier, and to take back your life. Your Live Alcohol Experiment starts on the 1st, so sign up at livealcoholexperiment.com. Hi, this is Annie Grace, and welcome to This Naked Mind podcast. I'm here with Peggy. Hi, Peggy. How are you?
Hi, I'm great on this Pay It Forward day.
Oh, yes. So good. So let's start sort of at the beginning in your journey with alcohol. Where did it all start for you?
Yeah, I was a late bloomer. So around my, alcohol didn't play a huge role in my life. Maybe a little bit, socially. Of course, it did in my 20s when I was, in my early 20s, but it didn't become an issue for me until I was in my 50s. And I think there was a lot of, factors. One was I'm a social worker and I was in direct practice at that time. And there's a lot of vicarious trauma from experiencing child welfare, child abuse. The system sucks. So that was, I think that's even the harder thing. You're going to be exposed to child abuse if you become a child welfare social worker. It's kind of a duh, right? It's a gift.
Gosh.
But the system trauma when kids disclose that they've been abused and they're the ones that have to go live with a stranger, I think it gets in your DNA.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
Then I became a kind of a involuntary whistleblower at work, and that's a long story, but just those three things that added up, and I'm, Paul and I are in a blended family. And I think just the pressure of all of that, I started to use alcohol more as like getting through those days at work. So, and which made it even crazier, right? Because I was working with families who were affected by addiction, and I was coming home and drinking wine at night. So,
yeah. And so first of all, how did you get into the social work? Like, did you choose that? Did you feel led into it, or?
Well, that's an interesting question. I had a dance studio, a dance, art and aerobics and theater studio for about 10 years in a small Northern California town called Colusa. And I loved it. I absolutely loved doing it. We put on local theaters, local plays with the community college and the school district, and did a lot of at-risk kid stuff, and it was just a lot of work. As you know, owning your own business can be overwhelming. So my kids were getting a little bit older, and they were really getting into sports. They were around, mid, 10 and up, about, 10 and early teens. And so I sold the business, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And we'd done a lot of community work for Department of Social Services in our town, through tobacco cessation and, a bunch of stuff. And we put on the Nutcracker for the school districts for free and all of that. So the director of social services said, do you want to be a social worker? And I really had no idea what I was doing at that time. I had no idea what a social worker did other than, work with, at-risk kids. But it really got into my blood. And, it wasn't very long before I went back and got my master's degree so that I could really do a better job. And I just kind of blossomed from there. But yeah, it's a great fit. And also, it definitely takes its toll. I think anybody that's a first responder, I think we're really high risk for drinking, because it is the system. It's not the children and families you work with. It's absolutely the system.
Yeah,
broken, right?
Frustrating it is to feel. I have a really good friend. She's one of my best friends, and she worked in this type of work for years. And it was very hard on her. I mean, very hard on her. And I think that her frustration was how powerless she felt within the system.
Yeah.
To actually affect change. So you were doing this work, and you felt like that was sort of an entry point for you. You know, were you introduced to it? Did you already kind of feel like, well, wine would help, or how did that transpire?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was very slowly, you know, coming home and having a glass of wine, then that turned into two. And then when the whistleblower thing happened, it started to take it out on me physically. I was really just walking in the threshold of the agency. I was, you know, just sick, and I would just get through the day, and it just built up, you know, from 1 to 2 to 3.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, that, you know, I retired in 2014, and 2 weeks later, UC Davis called me and asked me to come to work for them and teach for the university, which I'm still doing, and absolutely I'm in love with the fact that I can sort of make a difference at that level, and you know, teach new social workers the mistakes that I made. And I guess it was 2018, I got a service award for, out of 1,750 instructors, there was 3 of us, and I went home and celebrated it with a glass, with a bottle of wine, and of course they were drinking at the ceremony at the ceremony too. But that's when I kind of knew I was in trouble. You know, that my life was that my life couldn't have been any better at that point. I had a dream job, and I still couldn't stop. I didn't stop then, but that's when I knew I was in trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. And then what about in your family? Was drinking a big thing? Like,
yeah, I mean, I don't know how much. You know, it's interesting. I lost my parents when I was 19. So I know alcohol played a part in both my parents' life. It was, you know, alcohol was part of our culture in our home. One of the most coveted jobs in my family was to graduate to be the martini garnish maker, you know, two olives and 1 onion, you know. And so it was part of my life. But it's interesting because I have siblings that are younger and older than I am. Way up 10 years difference. I'm like right in the middle of 20 years. And I think my older brothers knew more what was going on and kind of protected me from it. So I think it would have almost been better if I knew why my mom was a Jekyll and Hyde, as opposed to, I had enough love in my life. We had a lot of really loving adults around me, which kind of counteracted all that stuff that was going on in my house, because my parents were pretty violent. But there's always, you know, like I have my mom's best friend, you know, really kind of took me in and stayed with me all the way through adulthood. So, I mean, I had that counteraction, but I really didn't know until I got really sober to really understand how much alcohol, looking back on it after I fixed me, to see how much alcohol had played, you know, a role in my parents' life.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So there you were, and what happened next?
When I was after UC Davis, well, let's see, that was 2018. So 2019, and there've been several incidents in between. I drank too much at my daughter's best friend's wedding, who also happened to be marrying our nephew. And, you know, I made a scene, and I passed out at my daughter's mother-in-law's house on Mother's Day. And then the finale was, we went to we go to Lake Tahoe every year for a family reunion. And I didn't drink during the day because up to that point, you know, my husband was starting to get upset by it. My daughter was getting upset by it. No one knew at work. I was, you know, I'm sure you've heard that a million times, that
Same with me.
only that kind of, I was teaching by day and breaking my family's heart at night. And I didn't drink anything that day because I didn't want to embarrass anyone. I was determined. And but I got home and I drank a couple shots of whiskey. I hate whiskey. And it hit me like a brick after 8 hours of being in the sun. And my husband got more than upset. And then when my daughter and my son-in-law, my daughter has 2 sets of twins that are now they're 5 and 9. They came out, we rented a cabin in Lake Tahoe, and Paul was screaming at me. And when they came home, my daughter, my son-in-law, and the grandkids, and then I have a younger son who's in his 30s. Paul was screaming at me. And Brett went after Paul, which, and Jason had to pull him off, and standing there really in front of my 4 grandchildren, seeing that scene. Paul left with no intention of ever coming back. And that next morning, Lindsay said, "Mom, if you don't do something about your drinking, you can't have the relationship that you want with me and Jason and the kids." And that was it for me. That was really it for me. I went into my bedroom. I knew I was done. It was almost a relief. Yeah. I couldn't have hated myself anymore. I was totally ashamed, but I walked in and I saw Jen Couch's Sober Sis 21 Day Reset on my Facebook page. I made a video that day, and really that was kind of history for me. We're friends now, and I just don't think it was a coincidence at all.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. So, so how was the process? What were the sort of things you had to learn, and how was it socially?
We did the 21-day reset, and of course, your book was Jen's first recommendation. And I'm a sciencey person. I teach, I coach, and I teach social work and family facilitation for UC Davis. And the science, again, I know you've heard it a million times, but the science just made sense. It was exactly what I needed at the right time. And I read that book twice. I took your 100-day challenge right after the 21-day reset. Jen had her one and only retreat in Fort Worth, pre-COVID, and I booked a trip to go on that reunion, and met a lot of really cool women that weekend. And I just started writing. Every day. That I was about 100 days in when I went to Fort Worth, and I just started posting on Jen's Facebook page, and I just started writing and kind of developed a little bit of a following. Because I'm pretty open about what happened to me, and I'm lucky that I am. I have like I said, I have a university that's letting me live my sobriety out loud, encouraging me to live my sobriety out loud. And so I just never stopped. I took Stacy Danford's brain boost class. I just never stopped doing it. Never stopped going to classes.
That's amazing. And then all your writing, you ended up publishing a book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So tell me about that.
It's called The Side of Alcohol, and it really is a culmination of all the journaling that I did from day 100. And people said, "Oh my God, you really ought to write a book." But the book means a lot to me in this way. About, I don't know, maybe 30 days in, Paul was still out of the house, and I asked him to read your book. And he read your book, and he read William Porter's book.
Amazing.
And he literally changed from, because he did a lot of shaming and blaming, just a boatload of shaming. If you love me, you would stop drinking. He's a financial analyst. He sees things in really black and white terms. You're weak. You're mental. I mean, just he couldn't have said any harder words. But after he read your book, he bought the book for his daughters, my stepdaughters as well. And he wanted to make it a go after he read your book. I'm sorry. It's really true. It's not made up.
That's so amazing. Wow, that's really amazing. And how do you think, so then he, I assume, moved back in.
Mm-hmm.
How did that go?
It was rough at first. He was mad, and he alternatively, understandably, my drinking problem was my family's problem.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anybody in my family believed that I was done. And so, that took a lot of time for them to kind of figure it out. I mean, I went over to see my daughter almost every day so she could see me, even if it was 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. If she could see me, we did manicures, and we just, even if I just sat there for a half an hour, I just wanted her to see, because, she had given me a list of rehab places to go, and I knew I was done. He alternately, went back and forth, for another few weeks. But I think, the longer it goes, just like any kind of behavior change, he started to trust me, and, it's still a little rough. I mean, we're almost 3 years in, and he's super excited that I got to talk to you. But he did write the final chapter in my book.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. What would you say to someone who is wondering how to rebuild trust? That's a question I get a lot. It's like, mm-hmm. I know I'm done. I know I've changed, but nobody believes me,
I think you have to really give the people around you grace. You can't expect them to trust you. And I think that's so built in, because it's kind of what I do for a living, right? So I have families saying, to us, look, I haven't had a drink, I haven't had a drug for 30 days. And, can my kids move back home? And it's very similar to that, is that it's about safety, right? So safety is acts of protection demonstrated over time. And trust is that way too, right? That I really didn't expect anybody to forgive me. And I knew it would take some time. Mm-hmm. I isolated a lot around my husband, not my daughter, because it was almost like that sort of childhood reaction. I didn't know what kind of person he was going to be when I walked in the door. My mom was like that too. But I think he's, I know he's very proud of me. And I think it just takes time. You have to give the people around you grace. You have to.
Yeah, that's so good. And how much time? I mean, that's another question I sort of get. Is it just indefinite? Whenever it happens, it may never happen. You kind of have to let go of the outcome, or how do you think about that?
Well, I'm sure you've seen it too, but your relationship completely changes when you stop drinking. I mean, one of my favorite podcasts from you is the one you did with your husband, and I had Paul watch that one too. That was a few years ago, and we, like any marriage, it doesn't matter if it's alcohol or whatever happens, you're always kind of falling a little bit out of love and falling back in love again. And I think that's the work it takes, no matter what is getting in between you. We still have a pretty strained, I still have a pretty strained relationship with his daughters. And it's interesting because I didn't drink, and I didn't have a drinking problem till all the adults were, your age and out of the house. So, we're still working on that. I still get a little resentful there, but, I think journaling is really super important, or some kind of But you have to, again, you have to do the work. You have to figure out, what were all those things. And, for me, it was one of those, I'm okay, nothing to see here. I went through a lot as a kid. I grew up in a violent home. I lost my parents at 19. I lost a 9-month-old child at 19. And so I was really in that, I don't know how to explain this, but I never really grieved over all that stuff. I had
Pushed it away.
my family telling me, you're 18, you can have more kids, you're fine. In fact, it's almost a blessing that this happened, because now you can start your life over. And so I got this huge message that it wasn't okay to be sad over things.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the other thing is, I have a psychologist I team with, and she's flipping amazing. She's so good, Annie. And I did lie to her for the first 2 years that I went to her. But when I finally came clean, she's been one of my biggest supporters, and also really helped me along in my marriage and with my kids on and on giving them grace, or the times that what she did is I would go to her and say, well, I had all these things happen to me, but look what I have now. I have beautiful grandkids. We have 2 homes. I have a great career. And she'd say, whoa, wait a minute. You still need to go through those things. And I'm sure not going through all that grieving process, and then, being exposed in a profession where there's so much abuse, I don't know if I answered your question correctly.
No, absolutely. There's no wrong answers. There's no wrong answers, Peggy. That's a great answer. I had a follow-up question, which was, navigating, what about with so we've talked a little bit about your part, like about Paul and his responses, but what about your children? How did that process go?
Lindsay, and again, you have 2 kids? 3, that's right. You know how different they are.
Yeah.
And it is so incredible that, Lindsay's 41, and she shows her affection in completely different ways. So if I'm doing an event next month. It's called Sober in the City, and she's coming. So that's beautiful. And she shows her affection and her support for me through like emojis or I'm proud of you, but by her actions and how much, she leaves the kids with me. And so she's not verbal about it. My youngest is very verbal. He talks about it all the time. He was a huge support in the beginning. He just really kind of watched over me, that week after everything exploded. And I talk to him almost every day. And then I have an older son who's a little, he's pretty quiet about it too, but he wrote a poem, or actually a rap song in my book about my addiction. But I remember when we had to put our first dog down, and Lindsay was like, Mom, I haven't missed school. I haven't missed school since I started school. I have to go to school. I can't deal with the dog, and Brett was like, see you later, girl. I'll see you next time. And then Matt and I went down to the river and cried. We took her down and had her put down, and then we had her, and then we just cried by the river for 8 hours, right? And they all handle it differently. But the fact that Lindsay is coming to an event for me next month is, really says it all, right?
Well, that's amazing.
Really says it all.
And did it take a while to?
Well, not really. Not really. I'd say, I don't know, maybe. That's a really hard question, because I was around them. They live close by. I made sure that we were, together. And she's not all that verbal. So I don't know.
No, That's awesome. Yeah, that's all right. Don't worry. What about sort of your social life and navigating friendships? How has that been?
Oh, I've lost a few friends, what I've really learned about myself is I can get up in front of, I'm doing a conference in June. I get to present my book at the UC Davis conference, but this isn't about me. What it's about is I finally I get to talk to social workers about the issues of the warning signs of of drinking, right? And not just drinking. It could be food, it could be prescription drugs, it could be Amazoning, it could be relationship problems. But this is the first time that I think I've been able to really talk about it, and I think that's amazing. And then, can you remind me what your question is again? Sorry.
Social life, like,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
What I found, that's what I was going to say, is I found out I'm so much more of an introvert than I was. I drank at social settings. I would pre-drink at social settings. And so I'm very selective about what I go to now. I like smaller settings. I like doing stuff with the kids. I love doing some, just smaller events. And I drive my own car. So, but I've met so many amazing, just amazing people in sobriety. Just, it's insane. And I think it's just because because of the truth. It's the truth telling, right? That automatically bonds people together.
Yeah, it really is. I totally agree with that. That's awesome. So, what would you say to someone who, is really stuck and struggling? How would you help them?
It's kind of like social work for me. It's like, what is one thing that you're going to do tonight to put your head on the pillow sober?
Hmm.
And really talking about the fact that, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again. To change it up, I think the biggest thing is to tell the truth. I definitely, the last few years that I was drinking, I was just a machine that lied. And I think one of the things that I like about, Laura McCowan is really shutting that third door. That a lot of people, I notice with the work that I do, a lot of people will say, my husband just doesn't believe that my problem's that bad. And my question is, have you really told him your problem is really that bad? Because I think when we want to hear that we're okay, we're not as bad as other people. Annie, I even had best friends that at the very end, I passed out in the garage. And they said, "Oh, Peggy, you work so hard and you don't eat when you drink, you're fine." And I wasn't fine. I wasn't fine at all.
Mm-hmm.
Even my daughter made excuses until the very end. She kept saying, "Mom, you don't eat when you drink," which is very normal for females to do anyway. But yeah, I really believe that you have to join community. You can't do it alone. You have to join something, no matter what that is. You have to work towards that emotional sobriety, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anytime you leave a door open is when you get in trouble, I think.
What do you mean by that?
That you don't tell the right people what you're doing, so that if you slip up, you're not accountable to someone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
I think my experience was a little bit different because I had the price was too high for me to pay.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have any issues quitting. I didn't have withdrawals. I didn't have any of that. But I do say, when I see people slipping or having a data point, whatever you want to call it, it's usually because they've they've left some door open where they could where they can justify drinking, right? And I think the other thing I see is spouses that really don't like their wives getting sober or their husbands getting sober. You know, you're no fun anymore. You're not as fun anymore. You know, that codependency thing going on.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. That I think that happens a lot. That's a big question I get of, you know, it's almost like he's trying to sabotage me or she's trying to sabotage me. And I think that there's so much fear in change. And I think we can alleviate a lot of that just through open dialogue and conversation, and, you know, letting people know that we don't expect them to change, and letting them know that, like, it doesn't mean that we're going to judge them or think anything's different about them. And, you know, just asking them to give it a chance. And then, you know, instead of jumping to conclusions of how it might be not fun, etc. But it's very common. That
I'm going to go back to the science. The science, when anybody says I can't stop, I give them your book, or, you know, give them the link. I give them William Porter's book, the link, because almost everyone says it. Once you understand the science behind it, it's hard to unknow it. It's very hard to unknow that. Very. And the community, you have to join the community. You can't do this thing by yourself. You just can't.
Yeah, no, I think that's so true. So Peggy, before I ask the last question, is there any other things you want to share?
No, this morning we were talking in a meeting about the with Ann Dowsett Johnson, her book Drink, around just the craziness, right, that we see. I went to a dance recital this summer with my granddaughters, and we walked up to the table, and the person checking us in at a child's dance recital had a beer in her hand.
Oh, wow.
And they were selling beer and wine at the dance recital. Now, I didn't see anybody have more than one or two glasses of beer or wine. But what kind of message are we sending our kids when we can't even have a damn dance recital without alcohol? Last year, I was in this last year, yeah, when school started, Target had a display that said, "Mommy needs school supplies too," with a wine display. So I do think that one of the neatest things about sobriety is how you start to notice that, and notice that when I'm around my grandkids, because my kids still drink, they're pretty, for now, they're responsible drinkers, but I notice that the grandkids just really gravitate towards me when there's a big social event, because they feel safe with me. And I do think that that's one of the most prevalent things. I almost feel like I'm lucky this happened to me, because I wouldn't have done the work, number one. And I have the platform with school, with the university, to really spread the word. So I have nothing but gratitude for all the things that have happened to me. And I mean, this is another example of you talking to me. It's just where I need to be, and where I'm supposed to be right now. So I just really appreciate everything you've done for
I love that.
recovery community as well. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. That's so awesome. Well, Peggy, let me ask you the question then that I ask at the end of these things, which is, if you were going to go back to yourself, especially the self at the cabin, or having some of those really hard times, and you're going to tell yourself about what life is like now, what would you say?
Just say it's an honest life. You have at least a third more to your day to pursue whatever you want to do. That you can actually be happy without drinking, that you're actually more fun and you have more deep belly laughs, and you can make a difference in the world sober. It's a gift. It's a huge gift that this has happened to me, and I wouldn't trade my life for the world. It's not, all the other stuff happens too. All the obstacles happen too. All the worries happen too. But you just get through them, right?
Mhm.
And it's just, it really is a beautiful life. So I guess that's it. Thanks.
I love that. That's so great. And it just struck me as you were saying it, how interesting it is that we live in a society where the default, how we're born to be, which is sober, is really the not the norm. And yeah, it's like, wow, living life how we were actually born to live it, which is, not having to drink all the time.
Mhm.
It's actually pretty great. Like it sometimes strikes me as just so, wow, how did we get here? How did we get to where it's the weird thing to do to
Yeah.
not consume the fermented liquid in a glass, right? The weird thing to do to not consume the toxin.
I
Blows
feel
my
like, and I do feel like my mom, I feel like I really, truly, from the bottom of my soul, believe that I've changed the trajectory of my family.
yes, of course.
My grandkids ask, "Hey, Grandma, did you bring the AF drinks?"
That's so awesome. Yeah, you've just shown another way. And I think that's like, so many people choose another way if they're just shown it. But when we're never shown another way, it's hard to even choose. I mean, of course. So it's beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Peggy. This has just been an honor. I really liked
That's
getting to know you and hearing your story.
Oh, you're an honor. You just made such a difference in my life. And my husband will publicly says that Annie Grace saved his marriage.
Oh,
Seriously, he
so
says
proud.
it.
I
Yeah.
love that. That's amazing.
Thank you so
Well,
much.
tell him hello for me.
I will.
Okay. Bye.
Hey, I'm so excited because we are literally just about to start another live alcohol experiment. And if you don't know about the alcohol experiment, you need to literally drop everything right now and go to livealcoholexperiment.com. Here's the thing. This is a 30-day challenge, and it's designed to interrupt your patterns and put you back in touch with the best version of you. You'll know it's that version that's living the most joyful life, that version that doesn't need alcohol to relax or have a good time, and that version that's having more fun and is more peaceful than ever. Again, it's just a 30-day challenge. It's live every single day. It's starting on the 1st, so hurry up. Join me at livealcoholexperiment.com. And as always, rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast, as it truly helps the message reach somebody who might need to hear it today.